after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino.
I'm Ben Kruse.
And this is Moving the Goalposts, episode 45. You can follow us on social media at MTGP, ETB, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Ben at
Ben Kruse 144. All in one word.
Okay.
All lowercase, 144 at the end.
Okay, cool. Normally it shows it. All right. Then you can follow all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com. And you can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, make sure to like and subscribe because that helps us out a lot. And this show, Moving the Goalposts, is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, so we have a lot to get to. Jets didn't lose this week. So that means we have to move on to the other losing New York team, the Giants, who get killed by the Bucks 30-7. There's a whole to me, this is one of the interesting things where it's like the game is not really the story. I mean, it is a little bit, but the story is mostly about the quarterback situation with Tommy DeVito and Daniel Jones. First, we do have to talk a little bit about the whole Daniel Jones thing. Sorry, I'm coming down with the cold. To talk. So I sound a little nasally right now, and it doesn't help that I'm talking about a team like the Giants. So when you look at this team and this disaster of a quarterback situation, well, to me, it is fairly obvious why Daniel Jones is sitting or now released because of the injury clause in his contract. Basically, the injury guarantee in his contract. One of my thoughts about this is the Giants beating the Vikings may have been like the worst possible win that they could have had. Because that's what ended up 2 years ago, because that is what ended up leading almost 3 years ago now. 2 years ago almost. That is what ended up to them paying Daniel Jones. So that win could have totally set the franchise back. As far as Brian Daboll, I don't think he's going to get fired. However, it looks like he's lost the locker room. That's what it looks like. It looks like he's lost the locker room. Malik Neighbors, who is a rookie, he's only played for maybe a little more than half a season, and is dropped a couple of key passes, and he was basically talking shit about Brian Daboll in the post game, and Brian Daboll is like taking it. So right now, the Giants are probably the second or third worst team in the league, is how I would put it, and I don't think it's going to get any better.
Yeah, it's a really just disastrous situation right now for the team. Just both on the quarterback front, the coaching front, and obviously, Nick, I know obviously the Jets have been kind of going through it all year, but It feels nice to talk about the team on the other side of things. And
what do you care? You're not a Jet fan. Well, you're a Patriot fan, so you're happy we're not talking about the Patriots.
Well, listen, like all I'm saying is like, well, the Giants have their own problems. So it's another New York team specifically to basically tell your team that you're obviously not the only one going through it. And another thing too is still feel like the Jets have more of a long-term plan right now than the Giants personally do, because the Giants right now, Daniel Jones specifically, like you mentioned, he looked like a quarterback a couple of years ago that, I mean, to me, I was never a big Daniel Jones believer in terms of kind of coming out of college. He came out of Duke, and, there's a bunch of tape and stuff of some things that he looked really good at and the promise that there was there. But always the problem with Daniel Jones was the amount of sacks he took. And also, to be fair, I mean, his offensive lines he's had for a while haven't been great. Another thing, though, about Daniel Jones is the amount of turnovers that he's had specifically by him. And I feel like he's just never put it together, whether he's had a good offensive line or not. He just makes a lot of boneheaded decisions. And basically, I feel like the first couple of years of his overall contract was an anomaly based of pretty much what he really truly is. So I think that, when I look at it, and I hate to obviously cross to my team, but I do thank the Lord that Mac didn't get an extra year onto what his contract was, because basically be in a similar spot of where the Giants are with, and being stuck with a contract like Daniel Jones's. Daniel Jones basically is stuck with that, so that's why they're forced to play with him despite the struggles that he had the last couple of years. And now they're now paying for it. They essentially had to eat up a ton of that money, and now you're essentially playing a couple backup quarterbacks because there's no other options that you have, and the options that you really do have aren't really that much better. So, I mean, truly, I think they're going to go look at somebody in the draft, whether it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I don't think Shedeur's going to go to New York, by the way. I just don't think that the media with him and Dion or whatever happens. I just don't see that fit there. But, I do think that the Giants need to go for a quarterback now with obviously DJ out. And I think that for the Giants, I mean, just the way that Saquon is obviously going, I think that they let go of the wrong person when it was all said and done. Now, I know that you could make an argument because the offensive line for the Giants has not been great, and the Eagles obviously have a good offensive line. But if you're just talking about the talent on the paper, Daniel Jones, I think that they're obviously favoring him because he was the quarterback, and he, of course, was the main guy.
Everybody does that.
Play favorites here, and they chose the wrong one. So they're paying for it, and now we'll have to see. Apparently, Josina Anderson from The Athletic said today that he's already, technically speaking, chosen a team tomorrow. Who knows what happens there? I know that Schefter is saying that he wants to play for a contending type team. So that's
well, if he's on a contending type team, he's not going to get a lot of playing time.
I don't know if he's going to be, even if there's a team out there that has a very mediocre room right now. I don't even know how many. When I look around the league, I know that there's obviously some teams that he could look at and be like, I could play for them. But does he really want to essentially be in the same type of situation he just was with the Giants, where they weren't contending for a while? Or does he, I mean, essentially, I'm going to look at it about this. Does he want to go and try to start and play for maybe another crappy team and just get his money, which I could obviously see happen? Or can he go to a team specifically and be a backup to maybe a team that has a chance to be a contending team in the playoffs? I don't know.
Well, my response to that would be beggars can't be choosers. It's going to be whatever the situation is going to, whatever lands in his lap, like whatever situation will be best. Because he's not going to have that many opportunities, just pick and choose wherever he's going to go. What I will say is, for Daniel Jones, wherever he goes will be a better situation than what he had with the Giants, because it's a new chapter. And look, Daniel Jones is not a bad quarterback. He is at best a mediocre quarterback, maybe a little bit below average, but he's not Jamarcus Russell or Bryce Young or anything like that. Bryce Young's been a little better.
Yeah.
He could be a lot worse is what I'm saying. Like he's not particularly, here's what Daniel Jones is. He is a conditional quarterback. He is almost like Geno Smith or Sam Darnold in a sense. Where it's like he can succeed in the right situation. Now, I would take Sam Darnold over Daniel Jones overall. I think Darnold's a better player for sure. But in that sense, sort of similar. Like he can succeed in the exact right environment.
exactly what I was
which
about.
a lot of quarterbacks, which I think we've learned over the past couple of years, that a lot of quarterbacks fit that description.
Right.
I mean, Sam Darnold is good in the right situation. The problem with Sam Darnold going to the Jets is that it was just a bad situation, especially for a really young quarterback, especially for a guy who was a star at USC. Where if you if you play at a team like USC, first of all, you mostly play in very mild weather. It's which at the time was a Pac-12 team. And your home stadium, Southern California. I mean, Southern California has some of the best weather in the country, as opposed to going to the Northeast, whereas like MetLife Stadium is a tough stadium to play in. I mean, a lot of Northern teams now play in domes, but you look at a team but playing at MetLife can be very difficult because you're playing in the winter and there's a lot of wind and it's very hard to throw at MetLife. Not to mention the fact that Sam Darnold did not have good coaching when he was with the Jets.
Right.
He started his rookie year in Bowles, who is a defensive-minded head coach, and he's not a great head coach. And then he had Gase, who is an offensive-minded head coach, but he stinks. He's really, really bad. So Sam Darnold went from the most perfect situation at USC, where he excelled, to the most difficult situation in the NFL. Right. And people are surprised. Oh, why didn't it work out? Why do you think it didn't work out? Yeah. He went from USC to the Jets, polar opposite situations. Not to mention the fact he was playing against fairly mild and fairly weak Pac-12 defenses. And that seems to be a very common thing with like USC quarterbacks. They're too laid back California. They're used to like having everything set up for them perfectly. And now that he's on the Vikings, things are set up for him. So he's able to succeed. The same type of thing could be true about Daniel Jones to an extent. Now, Duke is not USC. You don't have the best personnel around you, but it's a similar sort of situation. And 2 years ago, Daniel Jones was just in a really good situation. And I think that the thing with NFL teams and quarterbacks is that they're just way too desperate sometimes. They are unwilling, they are unable to really objectively evaluate quarterbacks. That's the problem. That was the problem with the Giants and Daniel Jones. They were like, all right, he had one fairly good year, and won a playoff game against the Vikings. Therefore, we got to pay him all this money. And that was the problem with that was the problem with the Giants did. Now, you were talking about Saquon. Now, everybody's got to talk about Saquon. And I'll tell you this. The Giants did not make a mistake not paying Saquon. They didn't. They would have been overpaying for him. And where would they be with Saquon with Saquon Barkley? With Saquon Barkley as the running back right now? Right now, they're 2-9. The Giants are 2-9 right now. Where would they be? Maybe 3-8?
Yeah, I mean
3-8. Well, what situation would they have been in? What good would they? It would have been like that meme where they show that. Here's what it would have been like if the Giants actually paid Saquon Barkley. It would have been that meme where it shows like the shack, like a tiny little shack, and like a really nice sports car. It would have been like they would have been like the Angels of the LA Angels of football. Having Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, but can't win any games. That's what it would have been like for the Giants. What good would Saquon have done them? And by the way, it is worth noting, there is no way Saquon would be putting up the numbers if he was still in New York. There's no way.
I agree with that.
There's no way, because the Eagles, like I was talking about with situations, they have a really good offensive line, a much better quarterback, just a better all-around team around him. So, of course, that gives Saquon more opportunity to put up better numbers. Obviously, that's the case. Where would a great running people make it sound like you can't be a bad team with a great running back. You can. You absolutely can. Just like you can be a bad team with a great wide receiver. Calvin Johnson, ask Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, they were some of the all-time greats, but they were often on really bad teams. So it's the same thing with running backs. Like, that could easily happen. I mean, even if Saquon Barkley did put up those numbers with the Giants, which he wouldn't have been able to. But even if he did, where would it have gotten them? Maybe they would have beaten the Panthers. Maybe. But a whole bunch of these games are getting blown out. It's not like they would have been able to beat the Bucks with Saquon.
The thing is, too, like Saquon the last several years, right? he had his problems with his injuries and stay on the field. But two, the Giants have had awful offensive lines for the last several years, and a lot of the times they have to really construct their lines in different combinations. So between all of that, I agree with you that I feel like Saquon looked at the situation and basically saw that, it wasn't getting any better on the offensive line front. If he wanted to go to a different opportunity, I understand that for many Giant fans, they were upset that they went to his division rival. But if he felt like that was the right opportunity for him with the better offensive line and just with the amount of better weapons around, I just feel like specifically he chose that because he wanted to find a way to succeed and he could feel like he could bring his full potential compared to specifically a situation that it's not giving them the overall pieces to succeed down the road.
Well, I think you're missing the biggest reason he left, which was the money.
Well, that's it.
The money was probably the biggest reason.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about the fit as well.
Every possible way, it would have like in every possible like any rational way of I don't know how many Giant fans are actually mad at Saquon Barkley for going to the Eagles. I think they're disappointed, but I know a lot of Giant fans. I don't know how many of them are actually mad at him for that, because if you look at it rationally, he just made the objectively right decision. I mean, if you're a Giant fan and I'm not accusing Giant fans of really being, because I don't think that's really true. But if you're a Giant fan and you're mad at him for doing that, it's your only argument is he wasn't loyal to us Giant fans. Your only argument is basically it makes me unhappy, therefore he shouldn't have done it. That's obviously dumb. They offered him more money and he was going to be in a better situation.
Yeah.
Period. That's it. Mm-hmm. That was it. I mean, if anything, I think you have an argument to criticize the Giants for drafting him second in the draft. If anything, that's a better argument against for Saquon Barkley than the fact that they let him go. I mean, what would they everybody saying all that stuff? It's first of all, you got to include the situations. You have to take that nuance into account. And the Giants situation is not the same as the Eagles situation right now. And also the fact that even if he did put up those numbers again with the Giants, it wouldn't have gotten them anywhere. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have gotten them anywhere. The rest of the team is so bad that being a bad team with a great running back gets you nowhere. It gets you nowhere. And as far as him, he made the right decision for himself. What else is he supposed to do? I don't understand. What else is he supposed to do?
Yeah.
And as far as the quarterback situation, Tommy DeVito, I don't think anybody thinks he's the answer. I think that what happened was the situation was so bad with Daniel Jones that they wanted a change. And you know what this was? Them starting Tommy DeVito was essentially entertainment. That's what it was. It was putting asses in the seats. That's what it was. It's exactly what it is. It is the whole cultural phenomenon of Tommy DeVito, who, by the way, has the same name as Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas.
Oh.
I don't know. That people seem to forget about that. But yeah, it's the whole cultural aspect of Tommy DeVito and that whole social media circus that they think that it would interest Giant fans, and it does. Mm-hmm. But he's not that great of a player. I mean, he's worse than Daniel Jones without question. He's just going to be a backup his whole career. He's not that good, especially with the personnel with the Giants, with that terrible offensive line. Yeah, he really was. He was under constant duress against the Bucks.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's almost like the Tommy DeVito thing almost reminds me a little bit of Linsanity.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
It feels like to me this is going to be a couple year wonder thing where people just make it all specifically about the show and just the name itself. But when you look back at it, it's more of the athlete, of course, has a persona, but it's really not on the field, it's off the field.
Yeah, well, the difference between this and Linsanity is that Linsanity actually played well for those couple of weeks so that's the reason why. In Tommy DeVito's case, he never played that good. It was just the whole cultural aspect of it, which is the reason why. I mean, Jeremy Lin, it was also because of the cultural aspect, but at least Jeremy Lin was good. Jeremy Lin actually played well, whereas you can't really say the same thing about Tommy DeVito. He never really showed any real promise. I mean, I don't know if you saw Baker Mayfield did Tommy DeVito's uh, end zone celebration, which I thought was. Well, here's the thing: the Bucks are like an average team, I would say, probably a little above average if they're healthy, above average if they're healthy. I think there is something kind of like shitty about there's something I really look down on an average team. I mean, Baker Mayfield's had a good year, but like kind of like an average team rubbing it in to a really bad team. Like there is something about that I think is just kind of shitty. It's like, all right, dude, it's the Giants. They're arguably the worst team in the NFL right now. The only team that's probably worse is the Titans and maybe the Panthers. And you're like doing a backup quarterback celebration in the end zone. Unless they were talking shit the whole week leading up to it, I think that seems kind of shitty. Like
and it is also too, like I mean, I like Baker a lot, and obviously I've loved in terms of like what he's done for the team and stuff, but it was a blowout, and like all of a sudden he just kind of has it out there. So like I don't know, like if it was a massive important part of the game, even if it like happened like afterward, just kind of was like a fun little thing, like I'd be okay with it. But like when it was a blowout and stuff, and you go to the end zone, it's like all right, like it's something just I wouldn't say it's not needed, but it just kind of like all right, you have to also look in the mirror and be like just going with the next play, trying to win the game. I know that the Giants are a great team, but I don't know. I agree.
Well, they asked him about it afterwards, and he was saying that it was to honor him. He's like, Tommy's a great guy, and I just want, like, come on, dude. It's like if you're gonna do that, don't insult our intelligence. Like, don't insult my intelligence by saying that it was to honor him. Nobody does another team's celebration in their end zone as a way to honor them. It's obviously meant to be a form of mockery.
Yeah, I mean, if like he played with him in like college or like he was a close friend of him, like I could obviously understand it, but it's. I mean, heck, I bet DeVito from a person per standpoint, he seems like a good guy. I feel like he probably be okay with it, but some athletes wouldn't take it. Like some people would be like, oh well, I didn't get permission from this so and so to have that happen, this and that.
Well, yeah. Yeah, which is, but like he didn't. He didn't seem to care that much. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, look, the Giants are like, they are like Brian Dable. I think has lost the locker room. I mean, if you look at the effort that the Giants put up against the Bucks, that goes to show you Brian Dable lost the locker room. But he's not going to get fired because he hasn't had his own quarterback yet. And the Giants are fairly trigger happy when it comes to firing head coaches. They fired Ben McAdoo after 2 years. Right after they actually made the playoffs, a year after they made the playoffs. And they tend to be like the Giants are a team that tends to be sort of trigger happy with firing head coaches, but I don't think they're going to fire Dable. And Dable doesn't seem to think he's going to get fired either. I do want to talk a little bit about the Broncos. The Broncos are doing really well. Bo Nix is having a great year, actually. Did you see this game against the Raiders?
I didn't, but I definitely saw some highlights about it. And yeah, I 100% agree with you. Of course, on Football Friday, silly me, the week before they played against the Falcons, and they had a really good win against the Falcons. The Falcons have been a pretty solid team overall this year. And then they followed it up, and I was just kind of looking at Bo Nix's last 4 to 5 weeks and just in terms of his play. And I think the first couple weeks, a lot of people were like, what the hell is going on with him? He looks like a rookie. Of course he's a rookie. Like for a lot of rookies, you can't just, it's like you're going to throw into the fire and expecting like you're going to all of a sudden just go crazy, right? So I think with a lot of these rookies, there's going to be a ton of ups, a ton of downs. And I think Bo Nix right now is currently on an up and he's playing with a ton of confidence. And I think for that team, they're basically falling soon in terms of the way that they're performing because of his play. So, the defense has played well. Their offense has obviously played well under him. So I think just for him, he's just playing with a lot more confidence because, he's throwing the ball out quick. He's not turning the ball over like he was around the season. And he's pretty much kind of showing to people why he has a case. I don't think he's going to win it, but potentially has a case for winning Rookie of the Year.
Well, yeah, they won 2 games in a row, and one game they lost was a very close game at Kansas City.
Right. Yeah.
Which is as good as, you could have expected from a rookie quarterback. He threw 4 touchdowns against Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
He threw 4 touchdowns.
And he
And
played well too in Kansas City. You obviously have to take that into account. So it's like for the last 3-4 weeks, this guy has been playing absolutely really, really good and deservedly so because the results of Cena, they're having a decent amount of wins and they're right there in the playoff picture as well too. So I think with their schedule down the road, I mean, I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning about them. It seems like kind of from the way that the schedule has lined up for them, like they have a really good chance to make it in as like one of those like back end wildcard teams.
Yeah.
If they, even if they kind of have a little bit of a hiccup here and there, which could happen. I mean, between them, the Chargers, I doubt Miami, but I mean, if Miami somehow just kept on this run going, I mean, I potentially maybe them, but I really think that Denver, kind of the way that they have their team constructed offensively and defensively, I'm not saying that they were a threat to go far in the playoffs, but they could definitely give some teams some trouble and some fits for sure.
Well, they probably wouldn't. Although, I mean, if we want to talk about like, by the way, I do find it sort of amusing now that like when the Jets lost to the Broncos, we were all like, I can't believe we lost to the Broncos, and now it's like I can't believe we only lost by 1 point to the Broncos.
Yeah.
like from the way that they are playing now and from the way that the Jets are playing now, I can't believe. Like it is unreal to me that we only lost, that we almost beat them. Like if Greg Zuerlein makes that field goal, makes a 50, I think it was like a 50-yard field goal.
Yeah,
we end up beating them. So that's unbelievable to me. Which goes to show you how like the season tends to progress. I mean, as far as the AFC playoff picture looks, it's actually fairly uninteresting until that last seed, because the first 2 wildcard teams are probably going to be the Steelers and the Chargers. They are far ahead all of the, which technically or maybe even the Ravens, because technically the Steelers are winning the division right now and not the Ravens.
Right.
But I think the Ravens are going to end up winning the division. But even if they don't, whatever, replace the Ravens and the Steelers. It doesn't make much difference.
They're pretty even.
Yeah, and then the 6th seed is probably the Chargers. If we still had a 6-team playoff in for each conference in the NFL, it would be very uninteresting. But I think that last seed is what really gets interesting, because you have a couple of teams. You have Denver, and you have, I would say, really Denver at this point, Denver and Miami. The Colts are technically right behind Miami, but
the Bengals are somehow like outside looking in. If something chaotically happened, right? Which of course chaos can happen down the road. But when I look at those 4 teams, Nick, I mean the Colts, it's something telling me I don't know. And then the Broncos, definitely, that you could definitely make a case. Miami, and we could talk, obviously I don't want to go in full thing about Miami, is I got to see in the playoffs. And I got to see it specifically with Tua in cold weather.
Well, you can say the same thing about the Broncos.
Right. But I think at least with the Broncos is they play in the West Coast, and they've had some times where they play well in cold elements as well. But you're also having a rookie that hasn't had a ton of experience really playing in cold weather too.
Right. Well, the thing is you have to remember the problem with Miami is Tua's injury. That's the problem. The problem is Tua's injury. And if he hadn't gotten injured, they would be in a much better position. They'd probably be right up there. They could be right up there with the Chargers. Since Tua's come back, by the way, he's been amazing. Since Tua came back, he's thrown like 11 in 5 games. He's thrown for over 1,200 passing yards, and he's thrown 11 touchdowns and no interceptions, and has completed 77% of his passes. That's amazing. You could potentially argue that Tua is MVP worthy. You could make the argument. Now, I'm not saying they would ever give it to him, because I don't like the way, the thing is, I don't like the way MVPs work. I think that if a player is injured and then it goes to, and then when he comes back and they're terrible when he's out, but then when he comes back, they're amazing and they do a complete 180. I think that guy should maybe get MVP. That's my view of it. Right. That they should maybe get it because that by any standard definition is MVP. But the fact that the Dolphins are going to get like the 7 seed or something like that means that they're not going to give it to him. But if you look at the Dolphins schedule and you look at Denver's schedule, I mean, even though the Dolphins are a half game behind the Broncos right now, uh, I could see. Wait, let me just pull up the Dolphins schedule. The Dolphins are playing the Packers
They are
this
the
weekend,
game.
and that's probably more likely than not a loss. But all of the other games that they're playing, they play the Jets, the Texans, the 49ers, the Browns, and the Jets again.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it on
They could
paper.
go 5-1 for the rest of those games.
Packers, I think it's gonna be a loss. I mean, a short week. I just feel like that feels like a Packer type of thing. The Jets,
It's a
I
short week
mean,
for the Packers too.
yeah, they could beat the Packers, definitely, sure. The Jets, I think it could be a toss up. Because I feel like the Jets, they're, I don't know in terms of how their defense will be against them. But
The Jets is not a toss-up.
well, I mean, listen,
It's not a toss-up. Come on.
well, all I'm saying is, in division, you never know about a trap game here and there for some of the teams, right? Because I don't think the Dolphins are like a great team either. Like I feel like they're playing well. They've had a pretty good streak going. So I mean, yes, I agree with you. I feel like between the Dolphins, and the Jets and stuff, I feel like the Dolphins are a better team. But I feel like out of let me see, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 games. I truly feel like there has to be like a trap game in there outside of like
Yeah,
against a loss.
that's possible.
Yeah. So I mean, and as a trap game feel to it, I mean, it could be. I mean, because they had the Jets twice. The Texans have not been a great team at home
The
for some odd
Texans are
reason.
beatable.
The Texans definitely are beatable. And the Niners, I think the Niners are very
The
beatable.
Niners, it depends on their health situation.
Yeah. But even when Brock Purdy, I like Brock, but even when he's been out there, like they haven't necessarily been beating the daylight of teams either. Like I
Well,
feel like that.
because of their injuries.
Right. But even
But
I
even
think
without injuries, like they didn't beat the Bucks by a big margin either.
no, like Debo definitely, for sure is taking a step back overall. Obviously Ayuk is down. Kittle, of course, has played well. McCaffrey obviously really hasn't gotten to his full on, strength yet back. So like, if you're gonna get them, I wouldn't say that they would win, but I think they could definitely has a gripe to take any of these games as winnable for Miami. So, you kind of have to go through it every single week. And like we talked about, I think that the top couple seeds we basically know, right? The Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, a lot of those type of teams we basically know about. It's basically that back end of the playoff picture that is really like the last couple seeds that are really toss up. I mean, obviously outside the Steelers and the Chargers, I mean, it's obviously that last seed. I think that's going to be really keyed on. And of course, now that what we're talking about with the Broncos, I think they can make a massive case for that.
Yeah, well, like I said, the Dolphins. Now, I'm not saying they necessarily will, but and with the Niners, like I said, I mean, they are playing at home against the Niners, but it really is going to depend on how healthy they are. Because if the Niners are injured, which they've been injured all year, which by the way seems like a very West Coast thing. All the West Coast teams seem to be very injured this year.
Yeah.
If they're a very injured team, the Dolphins should win that game. And you have to look at how good they've been since they've come back. Their only losses were by very small margins. Their only losses were by a combined 4 points against the Cardinals and the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
By a combined 4 points. They killed the Rams. They killed the Raiders. They killed New England, which, okay, New England's not a great team. Neither are the Raiders, but they did what they were supposed to do. The Rams are a fairly good team, and they beat them pretty handily. Even worse than the score suggests. So the Dolphins have been good, and Tua's been very, very good. I mean, for everybody talking about not paying Tua, I mean, just based on what he's done, even though he has an injury, he's injury prone. I get all that, and has gotten some awful concussions. Even though, like, despite all that, you got to admit that they made the right move paying him, based on how well he's been playing.
Yeah,
and
I 100% agree.
Yeah. So in terms of who my pick is to get that last wild card spot, it's the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are going to get it. I think that they have all the momentum in their favor.
We'll have to see. I mean, if you had to ask me right now, between McDaniel and between Peyton, between those two teams, I mean, it sucks if that both teams aren't going to get the chance to play each other down the road here, because I think that would be absolutely awesome to see, especially two teams that are playing really at a high level. If I had to choose one team, I mean, I could really go either way, but I don't know. Give me Denver. I kind of like their defense a little bit better. I feel like that the Dolphins also are very one-dimensional, offensively. I think that their passing attack is very, very good. I think that their running attack with Etienne and Mostert is good, but it's not very balanced. And I even saw that against my Patriots last week is where, if the defenses specifically aren't able to basically cover a lot of their weapons, right, they'll just keep on passing the ball. I think that in the game that just happened against us, they passed it about 75, 80%. Against really good defenses and against better competition, you can't have that happen. Right? You're going to have to be able to be a lot more balanced. And I think with the Broncos are able to basically be a little bit more on the balanced side, and they have better defense. So if I had to choose between two of them, I'm going to go with Denver, but I think it's going to be close.
Well, I'll say it also you have to remember, there is a strong possibility Denver loses their final 3 games. They have to play the Chargers on the road, the Bengals on the road, and the Chiefs at home. Now, that last game depends on what the situation is, because the Chiefs might rest all their starters if they're guaranteed the 1 seed.
Knowing the Chiefs, though, they never like to rest guys. Even in the preseason, I feel like they never want to rest guys. And if it comes to a week where they're able to knock out their division rival, something tells me that they'll play their guys.
I don't think they will. Maybe for the first half. Very few teams ever do, because it's bad for the injury risk.
Right.
I don't think they will. But the thing is, I don't think they're necessarily going to be in that situation. If they lose another game, which they very well might, they're going to have to win. There's a good chance they might have to win. So it is certainly possible that Denver loses their final 3 games. I mean, the Browns and the Colts, both at home, are fairly easy wins.
Yeah,
and they should win those games, but those final 3 games are going to be very tough. By the way, when I look at teams that are the worst against the spread, the Chiefs have got it. Actually, the Chiefs aren't that bad. Can you guess who the worst team against the spread is this year?
The worst team against the spread. Is it a good team?
No.
It's not a good team.
No.
Okay. Oh, let me think about it. Is it the Panthers?
No.
I'll take one more guess. The Giants.
No, but I'll give you a hint. Maydays.
Oh, well, Tennessee.
They are the worst team against the spread. The Jets are the 3rd worst team. The Jets, Giants, and Cowboys are tied for 2nd worst team against the spread. And the Chiefs are not good against the spread either. They still can't cover. They couldn't cover against the Panthers. If I were to rank the best teams in the NFL right now, I would say Lions number 1, Bills 2, Chiefs 3, Ravens 4, and then probably Eagles 5. I've come around a little bit on the Eagles. The Chiefs, they've just been playing poorly against a lot of sort of mediocre teams. And when they played the Bills, they couldn't beat them. So I'm not saying that they won't turn it on in the playoffs. We've seen this a lot from a lot of teams that, like, after Thanksgiving, they really turn it on. We've seen it from a lot of, Russell Wilson Seahawks teams and Aaron Rodgers Packers teams. That could be the case with the Chiefs. But right now, I think they're behind the Bills. And right now, I think they're behind the Bills and the Lions. I think the Lions are the best team in the NFL right now. I like to play this game sometimes. If you take how good every team is outside of the quarterback, the Lions are by far the best. Like, by far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you basically wholeheartedly. The only switch that I have, and this might be a bold hot take, and I know their secondary hasn't been great, I would put the Ravens honestly below the Bills right now. And I'd put the Chiefs maybe in the four hole. I don't know. The Ravens, to me, if I had to choose 2 teams right now, in terms of the overall play style and the way they're playing at the best, I'm taking the Ravens. I know that obviously they had a big one last night against the Chargers. Chargers are a pretty good team. Basically what the Chiefs are doing right now, Nick, is they're basically finding ways to win, but they're not necessarily finding ways to win on a dominant fashion like we used to know. And that kind of tells me either one or two things. One, they're basically showing that they're trying to have this as kind of a showing to what could be potentially done in the playoffs, playing down a competition, or maybe they're just a little overrated. And
Yeah.
obviously don't want to say that because I feel like, a lot of people have said in the past of, oh, that doesn't seem like the same team. I remember last year, a lot of people were early on, oh, this doesn't seem like the same team they once were. And then, of course, they have to be on the road team in the playoffs. Oh, Mahomes not going to do in the playoffs. They got to go to two really tough environments, and they win the Super Bowl. So it's really hard to bet against those two guys, and silly me for doing that last year during the playoffs where I bet against the Chiefs. I won't do that again. But I also do think that there definitely is something where you could basically expose their defense. Heck, Bryce Young, the Panthers offense, basically went toe-to-toe with them last week. If you told me that about a month or two ago, I would have called you like crazy,
Yeah.
like crack. And even this past Sunday, I would have called you crazy with the way that the Panthers are. But the Panthers, give credit to them and Bryce Young, they're playing a lot better than they have been. But I also do think that the Chiefs definitely have a ton of vulnerable spots defensively. And, I think that when you look at the balanced teams on paper, the Lions definitely, to me, I think by far are the best. Really good offensive line, really good run game, really good secondary. I know it just sucks Hutchinson, but they would have one of the best pass rushers still in the league. And Jared Goff, outside of that anomaly 5 interception game against the Texans, he's playing as one of the best quarterbacks in football right now. They still also have Amon-Ra St. Brown as one of the best receivers, and he will be for the long term. And, of course, they have the coach. Dan Campbell is definitely just not only is a good coach, but he basically just lives that environment too, which makes it even better. So I just feel like to me that the Lions and Bills are the best two teams, but I just cannot bet against this Chiefs team until somebody beats them in the playoffs as well too, which has not been shown on the last couple of seasons. So I still think that I agree with your list, but I just can never, as they say, never underestimate a champion, but they're not playing well at all.
Right. Well, I think that that's the point I'm making. Like, I can't stand when people talk about, well, a win's a win. And like, okay, yes, in terms of the standings, a win is a win, and that's all that counts, obviously. But it's not all that counts when it comes to evaluating teams. Like, there's obviously much more nuance to it, and it's not always the best predictor of how good you're going to be when it matters in the playoffs. Like, don't get me wrong, finding a way to win is always being able to find a way to win is very much a skill in and of itself. I've said that many times. It's also true that if you have to rely on your ability to find a way to win against a bunch of bad teams like the Panthers, which, by the way, if anything, which is a weird way of putting it because they were, if anything, they almost found a way to lose against the Panthers. Like it would have been the other way around. Like, it's not like they were down and staged this comeback. If anything, they almost blew the game. Like, so that's just kind of a weird way of putting it. And this is against one of the worst teams in the league. Bottom 5, not even arguable. Bottom 5 worst team in the league. It is not unreasonable to then question, okay, what are they going to do in the playoffs if this is what, or later in the season against better competition, if this is what they do against the Panthers? Not unreasonable at all. Like, if they play the Lions in the Super Bowl, or if, before that they play the Bills and they play that type of lousy defense, it's not unreasonable to say the Bills are going to beat them, even if they play in Kansas City. Not unreasonable at all to make that assumption. Like, as far as like the Lions, what makes them so great is that they're great at everything. It's proof that they're great at everything because they're dominating all of these games. They haven't lost a game since they lost to the Bucks, which was in September, I think. Other than that, and outside of that game against Houston, where they and that game against the Vikings too, on the in the road game against the Vikings. But outside that, which, by the way, the game against Houston, Goff threw 5 interceptions and they were still able to win the game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And that win against the Vikings where they won by 2 points.
Yeah.
For the most part, they've been dominant. They've been absolutely dominant. And to me, that is a much better sign than the Chiefs finding ways to win, and in some cases, the refs kind of bailing them out a little bit.
Another thing, too, is Patrick Mahomes. They asked him this past week, they asked him after the game, they said, in terms of how you feel about your team winning, stuff like that. And he said, I wish we didn't always have to play these close games and like kind of have a breather here and there. That basically tells me that they're still trying to find their identity. And like you said, oh, you're trying to find ways to win. Of course, that's great in sports. But when it comes against the better teams, and especially against teams that have given you experience in the past, and they remember you, like a team like, I don't know, the Bills, I don't know, a team like the Eagles, like they're going to be coming for you. And when you're essentially the champ and you're the champ for a reason, you're basically the hunted. You're not the, I guess, yeah, you're not the hunter, you're the hunted, because of course they won it, right? So they're trying to they're trying to get the throne away from them. And I think there's some teams that you could look at there, example, like a team like the Lions, that can essentially make that happen.
Right. I mean, but like the thing with the Lions is they can beat you in every possible way. That's the thing. They can beat you in every possible way. They have virtually no weaknesses. They have virtually no weaknesses. The only weakness is that Jared Goff is not as good as Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar Jackson. That's the only. That's not even a weakness, really.
No,
Like that's not even really a weakness.
He's honestly perfect for their scheme too, right? Because you put some they call it offsetting quarterbacks for guys like Allen and Mahomes. They're offsetting quarterbacks, guys that essentially can make magic happen out of nowhere. But sometimes you need to have the right specific quarterback for the system. And Jared Goff is a perfect example. Like we're talking about Daniel Jones. Jared Goff's a perfect example of their system. Basically, a heavy ground and pound type of game. They use play action. He's a really good guy with the pump fake and to basically sell defenses and throw really good balls across the middle of the field, in which guys like Laporta and St. Brown, Jameson Williams down the middle. He's a really good deep ball, low-key accuracy-wise too. So everything specifically, right, not only just the quarterback, but the scheme, the coaching. I just look at it on paper. And another thing too about the Lions is not only that they're a good team, that they're easy to root for, and they have not won anything in years. So it's like this whole entire story. It's like if there's any team, and I was actually telling my dad earlier this evening, I said, if there's any team that I want to see win this Super Bowl more than ever, I want it to be the Detroit Lions. I just feel like as a story, they're right there, and I feel like that this year that they have everything what it takes to make it happen.
Right. No. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, just right now, it just looks like the Lions are the best team. Like that's the only way to put it. The Ravens, I think, are very good too. I put them behind the Chiefs because their defense gives up a lot of points.
They do,
and they're also a 4-loss team. They have a few bad losses, is how I would put it. And I just think their defense is not great, but I think their offense is tremendous. I do want to talk a little bit about the Jets. What is the future with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers right now? And what are the Jets going to do? It's not even just about Aaron Rodgers. This is how bad the season has gone. People are talking about bring back Rex Ryan, bring back Mike Tannenbaum, bring back Eric Mangini. I mean, look, I'm old enough to remember the Eric Mangini and Rex Ryan eras. The Rex Ryan era is a little bit better than the Mangini era and the Mike Tannenbaum era. It is funny that we're talking about going back to them because we're just like, we do very much a little bit look as humans. We tend to look at the past through sort of rose-colored glass in a sense. Like it is easy to look back at those time frames and say, "Oh man, I wish we still had Rex. I wish we still had Eric Mangini." And I feel the same way, honestly. Like I do miss Rex Ryan. I do miss Eric Mangini. Although it is worth noting the Jets ran Eric Mangini out of town after 3 years. Not the best idea. Eric Mangini is a good coach. He's just never had a confident enough quarterback. That's the only thing with Eric Mangini. I want to see the Jets bring back Rex Ryan and Mike Tannenbaum. I want to see it. I actually really do.
I think that would be great. I think that for the Jets, they need to have some energy and they need to have some type of juice that comes back into their team. And I feel like the coaching with, obviously, I mean, Saleh, right? He brought some of that juice, but it was more of like the overall fit. I think that he's more fit to not be a head coach, but to be a defensive-minded type of coach.
Rex Ryan, you
mean? Well, I'm talking just in terms about some guys you guys have had in the past, like Bruce.
Oh, okay.
But I think that just to bring sometimes when they talk about bringing old blood back, it's not really the best. But I think maybe for a team like the Jets, it could be for the better. I mean, when you talk about familiarity, and Rex, of course, has talked already off the air about it, that he essentially could look at this team and basically has said that we are too talented to basically be the way that this team is playing right now. And if you're essentially a coach that's basically been that knows essentially the team and already brought in that type of team in the past to a playoff berth, you essentially at least have some type of feel of like, okay, if I go back into silence, and obviously hypothetically, you never know, of course, if he comes back, of course, how it would happen. But, you just never know. Maybe essentially could bring kind of that old juice and that old blood back to the team. And, I don't know if it would convince Aaron to come back, and maybe Rex essentially can maybe kind of work things out. But the Jets, the thing with Aaron was they never really gave him the right proper head coach to be specifically successful with him. So it's like, I think if I look at it with Rex Ryan, Ulbrich, and Saleh, out of the three, I mean, who would you want to have? Probably Ryan, because Ryan at least has that head coaching experience. The other guys are basically fallback options where the Jets really don't have a head coaching opening, so that somebody had to essentially be in the head coaching spot, and that's essentially kind of what happened. But essentially, Rodgers was kind of using it of, all right, I have to basically do everything on my own, and I basically have to use guys like Hackett and some other guys to try to make things work out. But you need to have a head coach, at least for these quarterbacks now, you need to have a head coach that is offensive minded. And if they can give him something like that, I don't think that Rex is offensive minded per se. But either you need to have a head coach that, but if you need to bring either a guy that brings a ton of juice or a guy that's offensive minded, I think that's basically how you should be able to roll, especially if you're a Jets team that, like we've talked about, the team is so much better than what they're obviously advertising.
Well, the problem with what you're saying is you're making it sound like Aaron Rodgers isn't like a veteran quarterback. It is like a rookie that they're developing.
No, not necessarily that.
The problem is really just that Aaron Rodgers is old, might be injured from the way that he looks like he's playing. And it really is much more about Aaron Rodgers, the problem with the offense, and the fact that they don't have and it's not just that. It's also, his miscommunications with receivers and things like that. And Breece Hall has kind of lost a step. He's very bad at scoring and is bad at short yardage and things like that. It has much more to do with that than it does with like the Jets not having an offensive-minded head coach. I would love to bring back Rex Ryan. I am all for it. Bring him back. It would be amazing. And if Rodgers doesn't come back, whatever, it's fine. I'm fine with that now at this point from the way he's been playing. And just from the way the offense has looked, I'm fine. I'm not shedding any tears. Aaron Rodgers might retire. He might end up retiring.
He could. He should.
It depends on what he decides on his darkness retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to get into the college football a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some crazy SEC losses. It's crazy SEC games. The SEC is just cannibalizing itself. Ole Miss lost to Florida. So now Ole Miss, after coming off that high win against Georgia, where it felt like they punched their ticket to the playoff, is now out because they lost to Florida. Florida is almost like they're almost becoming like the Purdue of, not like that this year, but like, or in this year's context, like the Kansas of the SEC. Like they're the ultimate spoilers, Florida.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. They're coming off a big win against Georgia at their place too. Jackson Dart obviously has been playing pretty well as a whole, but he had 2 interceptions in this game. It was on the road. Obviously, one of them is very critical. And Florida now, I know they're obviously not going to be, a playoff team or a deep one per se, but they are playing teams tough and against pretty good teams that, if you don't play at the highest potentially you're not playing your overall game, that anybody could get beat. But Florida's basically showing that. They just showed against LSU, and they're obviously now showing now against Ole Miss. So, especially in Florida, it's always a tough place to play, regardless of how good or bad they are. And now obviously Ole Miss, of course, they're really looking on the outside of things right now. Of course, I was looking at the college football playoff ranking show, and they looked like they took a decent step back already. So, because they obviously have an extra loss. So, now we're going to have to see in terms of what happens next week. I'm not sure who they have per se next week, but it's probably going to be a rival type of team, because typically we have rival week in college as the last week. So, if that's obviously a tough one for them.
Well, Florida is actually not that bad of a team. They're actually a pretty tough team. They also came very close to beating Georgia. They actually are a pretty tough team with DJ Lag, and they came very close to beating Tennessee. They are not all that bad. And by the way, I think Billy Napier is going to keep his job now. I think Billy Napier is going to keep his job if they go to a bowl game, and despite getting off to a really bad start. And DJ Lagway has been playing fairly well. So it's not terrible. But the thing is that Ole Miss, you can't lose to Kentucky and to Florida. I mean, look, Ole Miss totally blew their playoff chances as badly as anybody has this year. If you had just squeaked out a win against Kentucky, you'd be in. Even if you lost to Florida, and even if you had held on to that game against LSU, that would have been a really good win. But because they lost 3 games, they're completely out. And it's just the SEC cannibalizing itself. And I will say one side of this says, like the SEC apologists say, it's because the SEC is so good that that's why all the top teams are losing. The other side says it's because the SEC is so bad that all the top teams are losing. The reality is somewhere in the middle. Where it's like, okay, it is true that the SEC, it is true on some level that part of the reason the SEC is cannibalizing itself is because it's such a deep conference. It's much deeper than the Big Ten, which is the next best conference. It's much, much deeper than the Big Ten, which is basically, I would say, 4 or 5 teams deep, the Big Ten. Actually, probably 4. You got like Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana, basically.
Right.
As opposed to the SEC, which is much deeper. However, it is also true that the reason that these top teams are losing these games is because they're very flawed. Much more flawed than we previously thought. It's because Ole Miss is a very flawed team that they lost to Kentucky. I mean, I'm sorry, it's Kentucky. Kentucky is not a good team. Now, I get Georgia struggled against them too, but they at least beat them. Kentucky is one of the worst teams in the SEC, and you can't lose to them. You cannot lose some of these games that Ole Miss has lost. And by the way, I would be the first to tell you, I think Ole Miss has played a fairly favorable schedule for an SEC team. They played a fairly favorable schedule. And, it's a similar story to Alabama. Alabama got killed by Oklahoma. Oklahoma killed Alabama. And Oklahoma is maybe I would say probably the 4th worst team in the SEC. They are at the bottom. Their offense has been a disaster. Jackson Arnold has been terrible. And they killed Alabama. They killed them. This game was not even close. This loss is inexcusable for a team like Alabama. They controlled their own destiny. They wouldn't have made the SEC championship most likely, but they controlled their own destiny. And if you're a team like Alabama, a storied program, a great program historically, you can't lose a game like this. You just can't. It is so bad. It reflects terribly. I think it reflects terribly on coaching, to be honest. I think Alabama has taken such a step back without Saban. It's so blatantly obvious. This is the worst Alabama team since 2007, I would say.
No, I mean, obviously we kind of had a feeling that they would take a step back, of course, without Saban, but they're playing a lot worse. I think they're regressing harder than what we expected. And I think that, I'm looking at their overall stats from the game because I didn't get the chance to watch it. But they lost by 21 points to a quarterback that only threw 68 passing yards. I mean, how in the world for a team like Alabama, I don't even know the last time that ever potentially happened was, they just got outplayed by a quarterback that's not good. And Jalen Milroe, he had 3 interceptions, 164 yards passing. That's not going to get the job done. They had the lead rusher was under 50 yards rushing. So, yeah, I mean, just like you mentioned, complete disaster for a once – I wouldn't say once proud organization, but for a team that's had so high standards, it just – their team this year, Nick, is just completely unraveled. It's crazy.
And also, don't forget. Let's not forget that very close call against South Carolina, in which Jalen Milroe played a terrible game. I think the problem with Alabama, and Alabama is kind of like the Miami of the SEC. They tend to get into a lot of shootouts because their defense is very shaky. They have a star quarterback that they're overly reliant on. And to me, I think that the difference between Alabama and Miami right now is just that Alabama plays a tougher schedule. However, they're losing games. I mean, if they lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, those aren't exactly tough games. Those aren't exactly tough teams. And Against Vanderbilt, I think the problem was the defense for the most part because Milroe didn't play a terrible game. But against Oklahoma, the problem was probably more the offense. The defense, too, a little bit. I mean, they made Jackson Arnold look fairly good. But Jackson Arnold only threw 11 passes the whole game. It's not even like they used him that much.
Yeah.
He only threw 11 passes the whole game, and they ended up getting killed. The problem with Alabama and Miami is that their defenses aren't good, and they're overly reliant on their quarterbacks. And look, your quarterback is, even if he's good, even if you have a Cam Ward or a Jalen Milroe, even if you have a Heisman contender, they're not going to be great every game. They're just not. And you got to find other ways to win. And to me, I think a lot of this issues with Alabama, and this was probably a look-ahead game for Alabama, is what it looked like. They may have been looking ahead to Auburn. The Auburn's not really any better than Oklahoma, but you get the point.
Yeah.
This seemed like a bit of a look-ahead game for Alabama, and I think that is very much a reflection of the coaching. It does seem to be a reflection of the coaching when teams are looking ahead in these games.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I just think that, with teams like Alabama and Miami and a lot of teams that are heavily reliant on quarterbacks, if you can't win in the other type of fashion, and specifically more likely than not, your quarterbacks, as talented they are, they're going to have some off games. It's going to happen. It's a long season.
Yeah.
So if your defense can't show up and, your quarterbacks aren't playing well the same exact type of game, that's typically very unusual for Alabama because a lot of times Alabama has had the proper coaching with Saban where there's a lot of games that maybe their quarterback has not played well, but at least their defense basically overtakes it. Now it's almost like, all right, you look at, for example, in this game that just happened against a team that they should have no business getting killed by, their quarterback was not good, but their defense was also not good against a team that is also not good. So that basically says everything that you have to know about this Alabama team and basically everything that has basically regressed in terms of what they are now.
Well, speaking of looking ahead, A&M losing to Auburn was the perfect example of a look-ahead game. That was a perfect example. Texas A&M was just looking ahead to playing Texas. And like I said, this is also a product of coaching. Texas A&M, every year, they start off kind of good. And then, Texas A&M, they tend to start off kind of good, and then at the end of the year, their season just tends to just fall right off. They're very similar to LSU, and to me, this is also just Texas A&M has this problem where they always look ahead in these games. They did the same thing against South Carolina, where they got killed. From the way A&M has been playing, I don't think they have much. And Marcel Reed started off good, but now is getting kind of shaky. I guess maybe teams have film on him, and they're maybe now that teams have film on him, they can. It's easier to defend him. Sometimes that's the case, but I don't think they have much of a shot against Texas. Texas is going. I think Texas will punch their ticket to the SEC championship game against A&M.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that Texas is just balanced overall. They got the better coach. They got the better quarterback. They got the better overall type of scheme. And, Texas A&M, Nick, you basically hit the nail on the head. They feel like a team, there's a lot, of course, a lot of – in college football and regular football, there's a ton of teams with certain type of trends. And this is obviously a certain type of trend where a team that they look great on paper to start the year, but then, of course, they collapse and they basically look ahead and – everything kind of comes apart when it is needed most. And those are the type of programs where you feel like that they should have a lot more in them that they just don't.
Yeah.
Texas A&M, too, you have to take into account is they had Jimbo Fisher that came in and felt like that kind of maybe he was going to be the next type of coach that can kind of take them down the road and get them to be a respectable type of organization, in which they are. But it's like, against the better teams around in terms of their conference or just a big picture, it just kind of seems like they're like the outside looking in because, I don't know, something just tells me that they just cannot put it all in one piece when they need to put it in one piece. So I think that when they play against a team like Texas where they're just a better team on paper, they're just a much better team in general this year, and they have just the ability to beat you in different ways, I just don't see a situation where Texas A&M is going to be able to match the offense and match the defense that they have coming up.
Yeah. Quickly, Colorado lost to Kansas. Talk about a conference cannibalizing itself. The Big 12 is another perfect example. And the reason is because nobody in the Big 12 is that good. That's the reason. I mean, you can't even make the argument like you kind of can at the SEC, which, like I said, I think the answer is kind of in the middle. But with the Big 12, it's because nobody's that good. All the teams are kind of mediocre. I don't know how good college. I mean, I don't even like. I can't stand automatic bids for this reason. For this reason, I can't stand automatic bids. Whoever wins the Big 12 is probably not worthy of a playoff spot. I mean, Colorado, they've been, I give them credit. They've been good, although the start of the season was not good. They didn't have a good September, although they were able to pull off some wins. Like they needed a Hail Mary to beat Baylor. And they did get killed by Nebraska, and they didn't play well against Colorado State. I guess Colorado's kind of coming back down to earth a little bit. Like this conference has come back down to earth, especially after Oklahoma and Texas have left. But look, this conference is cannibalizing itself because the truth is nobody's really that good, is how I would put it.
Yeah, no, I think that Colorado, they're basically like the flashy dream team on paper, like the people always want to talk about. Of course, they have, of course, the spotlight with the coach and, of course, with the son and everything. And deservedly so, of course. They got a really good, talented team, of course, with Shedeur and Travis Hunter and a bunch of guys specifically. But their defense on paper has given up a shit ton of yards against some very subpar average type of teams. And they're solid. They're a fine team. I don't think that they're a great team. They could beat anybody, but they could lose anybody. I mean, Kansas has been. They just beat BYU the week before, so they were kind of coming off of a pretty good win. But a team like Colorado who's trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they're now on the college football show, the last team standing. They're obviously trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, and so I felt like that, against a team like this where you feel like they want to kind of show themselves and try to find a way to win until Oklahoma State comes to them next week. It's just a tough one for them to basically swallow. So.
Yeah. Well, like I said, that conference, Kansas has been good lately. Kansas has actually been fairly good from the way they've been playing lately. And yeah, they're like Kansas are like the ultimate spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
They're really they've really just been the ultimate spoilers. As far as BYU, I don't think they've been great lately. Mm-hmm. They needed a miracle to beat Oklahoma State, who is one of the worst teams in the conference. They also had a very fortunate holding call to beat Utah, who's also one of a very, very questionable holding call to beat Utah, who is who might be the worst team since Cam Rising got hurt. Is arguably the worst team in the Big 12. So it's not like they've been dominant. Kind of like what we were saying about the Chiefs. Like it's not like they've been dominant. I do want to. All right, there we go. I do want to end the show with another edition of Unnecessary Wagers. So here it is. It's a 12-pick parlay. Each team to score one or more touchdown and one or more field goal between the Steelers and Bengals. Chargers -2.5 at Atlanta. Bucks -6 at Carolina. Ravens -3 against the Eagles. Lions -10 against the Bears. Keep in mind, the Bears have still not won a game on the road, and the Lions have been the most dominant team. Dolphins +3.5 at the Packers. Raiders +12 at the Chiefs. I like this. The Chiefs are, like I said, the Chiefs are not good against the spread.
Yep.
Seahawks -2 at the Jets. Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame running back, to score as an anytime touchdown scorer, and Woody Marks, USC running back, as an anytime touchdown scorer. And then Syracuse +10.5. Miami versus Syracuse +10.5, and the over 67.5. I bet $1 to pay out over $1,000. $1,000, $69.72.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the NFL props that you had, definitely I love the Raiders prop there. It was the 12.5 you said. I looked actually at that line earlier today because somebody at work asked me about that, and he said 12.5. I'm like, yeah, it's crazy because I'm like, I would have thought maybe at worst it would be like 7.5 to 8, but 12.5 double digits. They were, I think, a 7.5 to 8 against the Panthers. Actually, Was it 10 or 11?
The Chiefs against the Panthers, they were
It's like 11.
10.5-point favorites.
Yeah, so they're double digits, and I wasn't even close, right? So I love that Raiders one. I think that the Raiders, they know them defense. Obviously, they play each other. I think that familiarity is massively. I don't think that they'd obviously win, but you look at it. Remember last year, the Raiders went to them on Christmas Day and spoiled obviously their party for a little bit. So never say never. So I like that one a lot. The Ravens and Eagles game, that was a -3 for Baltimore.
The Ravens, yeah.
Yeah, I like that one too. Especially the Ravens are at home, but I think it's gonna be a close one. I really like that prop a lot. The Chargers at the Falcons, right?
Yep.
That's a good game. The Chargers, I think, really need that one. They're coming back from a tough one against the Ravens. And the Falcons, obviously, I think were on a bye this past weekend. So I think that they are coming off pretty fresh. And you said the line was that for the Falcons, right? The
2.5 the Chargers are giving, or the Chargers are giving like 1.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be pretty. The game could go really either way. I think that both teams.
2.5.
Fairly evenly matched. So I can see the. I mean, if I look at both teams, I probably would lean the Chargers a little bit, especially because they're coming off of a tough one. A team that comes off of a bye could be a little bit rusty. So I might take that into account. The running back, like you said, for Notre Dame, who was absolutely incredible at the game I was just at. I don't know if I'll have the chance to talk about the story really quick about that, by the way, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, he went off. I could definitely see that at any time. The Notre Dame, from at least the game that I saw, they run the ball a hell of a lot, but they have a very good running game for sure. They're a good offensive line. And then what else did I miss? I feel like I missed still a couple decent things, but Seattle and the Jets, right? Seattle that was a -2.
Seattle -2.
I like that a lot. I think that Seattle, they had a good one against the Cardinals this past week. I think that they can continue that road next week against this upcoming week against the Jets. And then the Miami-Syracuse game, right? Syracuse, I think, is it at Syracuse?
It's at yeah.
It is. And Miami's, of course, the favorites, right?
No, I took Syracuse to cover.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
Miami doesn't seem to cover these games.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for watching and listening, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is Moving the Goalposts. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. See you then.